Welcome to the Kansas City War Room, Warlords. On this episode of the Strategikon Saga Podcast, we're going to start with something a little bit different this time, and we're going to get into doing faction reviews. And regarding the kind of the namesake of the podcast, the first faction review we're going to do is out of the Age of Invasions book, and we're going to do the Romans. And so the person I brought on today is one of our local players who's run the Romans a lot. And so I just want to kind of welcome you to the podcast, Charles.
Hi, Brett. Happy to be back here.
Yeah, glad to have you. And so, like I said, the reason I brought you on is I've been wanting to do a Romans faction review for a while. And you're somebody who runs them a lot. And I say I'll start off with kind of sharing some of your record, and I'll let you kind of share some of your background with running these guys more as we get into it. Say, I know recently we did the online league, and in the first 5 games, you went 5-0 with these guys. I say I know I've played you quite a bit personally with the Romans, and you figured them out really well.
Yeah. In the online league, they were Swiss pairings, so you're playing up to play the winners, and the Romans won the regular season part of it, so I was pretty pleased with them.
Yeah, yeah, and they do really good. And I say everywhere I see them now popping up. I say we just got back from Adepticon. There were quite a few guys running them there. One of our other local players, Josh, runs them quite a bit as well. And I'm seeing them across like the Euro leagues. The Romans are popping up everywhere, and they're doing actually really well for I think some of the Passover on a warband. They're doing really well.
Well, they're fun to play, and they're as we get into the board, you're going to see they're quite a bit different. So it's going to be a different experience running the Romans than a lot of war bands.
Yeah, and so that'll kind of lead us into it. And so, like I said, as we kind of talk a little bit about this, I might kind of pause as we go through it. I kind of want to say this is I love the history, obviously tied into this warband, as we talk about as we're sitting here on kind of the Strategikon podcast. But it's something that I don't know if it gets talked a lot about. As you look through this board, this is maybe for some of the newer players or guys who aren't used to Roman history. Every single thing on this board has a really deep meaning to it. And so I really encourage you, even as you're looking at just the name to activate the Hearthguard, activate the Warriors, activate Levy, all of those, even though at the top of this board, it's all the standard activations, combat bonus, and then we'll kind of get into the one thing that's very different at the top. But take a second to read through the book, because I loved how much history they bake into this stuff. Just the names of everything. And so that's kind of a shout out to Studio Tomahawk for just the depth of history. Even if you don't look at it and you don't care about it, it's really cool to see it.
Yeah, and I would suggest if you're listening to this podcast that you get your Roman board out now so you can follow along, since we are audio only.
Yeah.
So you can know what we're talking about as we go through it.
Yeah. And so before we jump back into the board, I want to quickly go over equipment options. And so this warband, they have quite a few different really fun options. I really like in the Age of Invasion, there's a lot of cataphracts running around. And so I'll start with the Warlord. He can be taken on a cataphract, so mounted cataphract, mounted on a horse, and then standard no equipment. Then you have Hearthguard, have cataphract, horses, and then no equipment options. Warriors, they have no equipment options, bows, and then horses with composite bows, which I always really, really have learned to enjoy. And then the last thing, the levies, they have javelin levy, standard levy, so sword and board levy. And then probably the scariest unit that we're probably going to spend quite a bit of time talking about is the Manny Ballista.
Yep.
And so that kind of jumps me into, before we even get to the board, Charles, if you wouldn't mind walking me through kind of what do you like taking? What's your list? Why do you like running some of the equipment options through here?
Well, I've played this several different ways, and you can be successful with quite a few different things. I've taken mounted Hearthguard. Very seldom do I take foot Hearthguard, and lately I've been playing it without Hearthguard. Our friend Joshua that you mentioned does run foot Hearthguard with this board, and they do pretty well. So that's kind of a play style preference. I've taken I don't take any foot warriors. I take a lot of bow warriors. This board supports them extremely well. Occasionally I've taken a composite bow horse. They can be really useful in certain scenarios, and I'll always try to have an option in the thing where I can add them in, where you can switch different types of units.
Yep.
And then I take a lot of levy. And always take a mana ballista.
Yeah.
And I think one mana ballista is enough. I've seen some guys talk about wanting to have two, but they're a little hard to activate. They don't generate a sack of dice. And the purpose of them is to kind of reach out and touch stuff, and it's also to intimidate the other guy. And one intimidates as well as the other. They're a bit hard to place on the board. We'll talk about them in depth when we get to them.
Yeah.
But certainly you need a mana ballista in your Roman build.
Yeah, and kind of jumping to the mana ballista really quick, because I know there's a lot of confusion. Can you run multiples? Can you not? As it stands right now, the way the wording, it's kind of really up to you. I know a lot of people say you can only take one per the rules, and I know there's like a big request for a more of a clarification on that for like an FAQ, something along that lines.
Yeah.
But how many do you like to run, Charles?
Well, I just run one. The way I read the rules, that's what you should take. Although I can see the reading where you can
maybe take a couple more.
You can take a unit of two, but
yeah.
But then how are you activating them? Or you still have to activate them separately, or you can't fire them. So it's pretty ambiguous, and I think one gets the point across and does what you need it to do.
Yeah. And so Yep. Go ahead.
So my basic Roman build, I'll go ahead and give you what that is. So lately it's been the Warlord either mounted or on foot, depending on the scenario. I don't take the cataphract version. I've never ran cataphract Hearthguard. I think they're slow, so it's I take a lot of bow warriors, usually at least a unit of 11 or 12, and then maybe a few others warriors, which would then tend to be composite bows. I'm sorry, and then several units of levy, 3, sometimes even 4 units of levy. Wow. Depending on the size, and sometimes those will be in 11 or 12 packs, and I might have a 6-pack for support, or we may pull a couple off and have an 8-pack, which can still hold an objective or something. So that's kind of the way I tend to run them.
Okay. No, I like that list, and like I said, I know I faced that Manny Ballista, and my goodness. But jumping back, so for you, you're not a fan of the cataphract.
No.
And I understand why, right? What they move M, they charge L, and then their armor is 5/5. I say the only time I've really ever run them a lot is like when I ran Assassinants, and I never really feel like I got the mileage out of the extra armor.
Yeah. This board can kill cataphracts, so not that means you're going to kill them yourself, but I just I don't know. I unless I'm running something like Huns, I don't take a lot of cavalry unless it's a cav board that supports it. And this board doesn't really support cav units very well. So this is all about the infantry, which it's a Roman board. It should be.
It should be, right? I think the idea, I like composite bows, and I've fallen in love with comp bow warriors mounted just because they're so utility to a board. I think that's kind of the trick I've slowly learned, to add them to any list that gets them, just because they can go do something. If you need to go over here and do this, you need to go over there and do that, you can send them real quick and you don't care about them. So,
well, if we want to get into tricks of the board, there are a couple things with the combo warriors that are absolutely brutal this board can do. So we could talk about those in a bit.
Okay. Yeah. And so that gets us through the list. And so for you kind of like to run 3-4 points of levy, couple points of couple warriors. And I know you like to run your warlord mounted often. Is there any specific reason? Is that just to keep him safe so he can be very mobile, or is it just kind of what's the
2 reasons? I mean, I'll run him depending on the scenario. I'll put him on foot if he's going to be where he could get into combat pretty quickly, or somebody could get could have a chance to engage him. But if we're starting quite a ways apart, like a lot of scenarios do, I like to mount him, and I can keep him behind the levy where he can give orders. He can order the mana ballista, but then late game he's got maneuverability to get out and go get
Mm-hmm.
something, to go attack the other warlord, to attack weak units.
Okay.
When you want to get out and do something with him, where a foot warlord is, uh, a lot
Mm-hmm.
slower.
Yeah, unfortunately, yep. So okay. And so that thanks for that, by the way, Charles. And so that kind of leads us into the board, is kind of getting to it. And really quick, I guess never mind. I want to back up really quick and talk about the Manny Ballista. So the Manny Ballista, and just to go over the rules really quick, it takes you have to take away 6 levy. It doesn't generate a saga dice. It's armor 3/3.
It's impetus, but it is it does have resilience 1,
Yes, it does, and
which helps it a lot.
it's kind of always been I think a running joke is that unit, just no matter how much you hit it, it just never wants to die.
Well, there's ways to defend it, because there's an ability on the board that we'll get to that defends some of these units, and so you can get it where you can be saving, on a it can act like it closed ranks, even though it
Okay.
can't.
Mm-hmm.
So, which obviously makes it harder to kill, and typically you're going to put it someplace on the board where it's hard to get at anyway. I like to put it behind some type of cover. It can't be placed in terrain,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously it can't shoot over forest or hills, but it can shoot over swamps. It can shoot over rocky ground. And if you get it behind some of those things, it makes it really hard for the opponent to get to it. And it has a 24-inch range, so
Mm-hmm.
it can cover a significant part of the battle board, and it's +1 to hit, which is a really nice thing. It gets 1 shot for every 2 figures in the target unit, rounded up, of course, SAGA
Mm-hmm.
ability.
Yep.
And the board has ways for it to get auto hits, so it can be something the opponent really has to fear.
And I will say is I faced it quite a few times. I wonderfully always manage to run levy armies against you when I have this thing, or when you have this thing. So you're getting like 6 shots +1. It's wild.
Yeah.
But
It does activate as a levy, and
Mhm.
if you can only activate it once, and then you have to have a movement activation
Mhm.
or another turn to activate it again. So if you try to multi-activate it, you're going to put a lot of fatigue on it. So basically, it's 1 shot a turn.
Yeah, but that 1 shot is good. And like you said, it's 24-inch, so it's 2L. And facing that down, like I said, I've watched a lot of your games against other guys, and I know how I was when I first started seeing that thing. And it's a menace. It just kind of brings a lot of fear factor along with it. The fact that you have something sitting back there that shoots at +1, it shoots 2L, and I got to come get it, or it's just going to kind of plink at me the whole game. And like I said, I know with you, whenever I see a swamp or a rocky ground go down, I know that's where the ballista's going, and so I've got a plan. How do I get around that swamp? How do I get through his backfield to get to that thing?
And I think one of the things we're going to talk about is mercenary units that you take with this
Mhm.
list. And there's a mercenary unit I really like that goes with
Mhm.
these guys that we'll
Yep.
get to.
Okay.
So they're really good for the meta ballista.
Yep.
So so you want to go across the top of the board, or
Yeah.
go
So
from
what we'll
there?
do is I think because this board, so we'll kind of go through the activation. So it has a lot of standard activations. Um and like I
Yeah,
said, walk
go ahead.
through it, and so up top it's the normal activation. So you have your Hearthguard hero activations, warrior activations, levy, combat bonus, which is a standard combat bonus.
Yeah,
And
those
then
are all standard.
the one thing it doesn't have is it doesn't have an activation pool. Instead, it has rallying cry.
Yeah.
Um,
Rallying cry is to support your impetus. This is the unique thing on the board.
mhm,
If we look at the lower left-hand part of the board, we see the impetus, and the board starts you off. You get 4 free impetus, so you put a coin there so you can kind of
mhm,
track it up and down. And rallying cry, you're going to use your impetus because a lot of these abilities require you to, or give you bonuses if you use it. And so uh, you've got 4 free ones, but the higher your impetus is, the better some of these abilities are. So
mhm,
you're going to want to put some dice in rally cry from time to time to keep your impetus high.
mhm.
Uh, and then part of the trick to the board is being able to manage it. So on turn 6, you run out, but
Yep.
you want to have plenty for turn 4 or 5 or whatever.
Hmm.
And so keeping track of it. And the board does have a one order where you can one time get more dice, and that's on the lower part of the board.
Hmm. And this is a kind of a quick question. So for you, like I said, managing impetus, which is, like I said, a lot of abilities take it. And so impetus is this thing, this additional load that you've really got to manage while
Yeah.
you're going through it, because impetus does a lot for you. It allows you to, like, and we'll get through it. It allows you to multi-activate. It gives you defense dice. It gives you all these different things. But you have to have it. So you kind of got to build it up and use it at right times. Do you ever find yourself putting your rares, like your first rare or kind of additional rares, do you ever find them going into Rallying Cry?
Well, additional rares often go into Rallying Cry.
Okay.
There's another spot on the board that occasionally additional rares go to, but depending on how many dice I've got and where we are on the board, uh, there's an ability called adversity that's going to get the first rare. But
Hmm.
the board's got a couple of really good places for rares, but generally speaking, the board wants commons and uncommons to activate. Uh, the impetus represents, to me, kind of the morale of the army. The army fights a lot better if the impetus is high,
Hmm.
so, but that's, they're winning, so you can
That's
look at it that way. In Saga, fatigue is kind of takes into morale is kind of built
Hmm.
into fatigue. In
Yep.
Saga, we don't really have a fatigue rule,
Hmm.
but the Romans have kind of got it double because they take fatigue like everybody else,
Yeah.
but if the impetus is high, we're rallying the troops with Rallying Cry. It's
Hmm.
think of the Roman army surging forth.
Yeah, I always like the idea of it too, because I love playing like the last Romans. I love playing the Byzantines. And they all have, everybody has kind of their own unique way of going at this. And I've always thought of it too as kind of like the Roman, like how ordered are they? How
Yeah,
together are they? How, like you said, how unified is this Roman front? And impetus is, I like that thought of it, is
yeah,
like how encouraged are your men right now?
yeah,
So, okay, so kind of spare rares tend to go up here, especially maybe when
yeah.
I assume this is kind of, and we'll get into the tactics of it too, but I assume a lot of times it's if you know there's going to be a busy round and you need to make sure you have impetus.
Yeah.
I'd
Well, you're gonna
imagine.
put sometimes you're gonna put anything you've got up there to raise
Hmm.
your impetus a couple points.
Hmm.
And then the board helps you get dice. And we'll talk about adversity when we
Okay.
get to it.
Yep.
But it's tied into impetus to some extent.
Okay. And so as we kind of start going through this, we'll talk about impetus probably on and off throughout this. But just starting off, I love the idea of thinking about like the way you put it and understanding it's something you've got to manage. You've got to use it when you need it, um, and kind of holding the line. I always kind of think the Roman line, you hold the line until you need to kind of burst out. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so it takes us, as like I said, we'll kind of go through the abilities really quick, and then once we get done with these, then we'll kind of do a tactical overview.
Okay.
And so the first ability takes us to Fotis. And so I'll kind of read through this one. So it's an
Yep.
orders reaction. It takes a rare. Choose an enemy unit. Until the end of the turn, it suffers an additional fatigue at the end of each shooting attack it makes, uh, and melee it is in. So you can reduce your impetus by 1 to choose 1 additional unit, or by 2 to choose 2 additional units. Um,
Yeah. So a couple things on Fotis here. One, this board doesn't have traditional multi-activations, although it's got multi-activations all over it, and they're all tied to impetus.
yeah,
so,
yep.
except one,
Hmm.
which is really an untraditional multi-activation. But the I don't use this a lot, but I do
Hmm.
use it on occasion if I do get a roll with several rares and I know that combat's coming.
Hmm.
Like if I've taken an objective and I'm going to have to hold it. Generally, I'm going to take objectives with those big levy blocks that are 4/4s,
Hmm.
so they can close ranks and it can be really hard to move.
Yep.
And you put this on with you're going to charge one of them, and now you're going
Yep.
to take 2 fatigue.
Yep.
So uh, once in a great, well, I think maybe once since I've been playing them, I did 2. But you
Okay.
will, often uh, you know play this if you know combat's coming and you've got a lot of rares.
Hmm.
This
So,
isn't the first choice to defend with, but it's certainly
mhm.
a valuable one if you've got the dice for it.
it's a scary one, you know. I think
Yeah,
about as I face this down, and all of a sudden you choose my, like, say I have like an 8 pack of Hearthguard. I can't wait to get in there, and I go, well, now I don't want my Hearthguard having rare or two fatigues on it. And so I
yeah,
kind of think about what's the other plan. So I've always liked the way this ability looks.
yeah.
Um, but like you said, it's a rare, maybe just a little. You can't throw it every turn. So
No, well, you're only going to throw it when you know combat's coming.
hmm
So otherwise you just set a dice there and it just sits there.
yep.
So, but if you have a turn where you roll 3 or 4 rares, which once in a great while happens, and
hmm
maybe turn 2 or 3 you're going to fight, then you might put it up there.
Yeah. It's a good one. Like I said, I like it. So the next one we run into is Limes. So this is
Yep.
a melee ability. This is an uncommon unit with an S of another friendly unit without ranged weapons. Reduce your impetus by 1 to get a +1 bonus to your defense dice.
Okay, we play this all the time.
Yep.
This is one of the bread and butters of the board.
hmm
Uh, this makes your closed ranks levies save on 3.
hmm
It gives you the ability to save your bull warriors on a 4 if they're not in heavy cover. You can save your bolt thrower on a 4 because
Yeah.
generally speaking, somebody without ranged weapons, it might just be the warlord. He doesn't have them.
hmm
Is within S, and so as you set the army up, you want to take these things into account on who's supporting who,
hmm
and so you have to have another friendly unit. So the levy
hmm
units can't support themselves, but the warlord can support them, and they can support each other.
Yep.
So and it does make them just a rock to move.
I love this ability because, like I said, I know a lot of the Roman boards. They all have something similar to this. Um, and I love the idea too. Is I use this on, like, the Byzantine board has a very similar one, and it's kind of the idea, like, if I know you're going to come into like my melee levy, um, I could choose to not close ranks and get those like 6 attacks and still almost save like I close ranks. So I always kind of like that. There's a lot of variability, how to use it, when to use it. Like you said, with your bolt thrower or the mani ballista,
Yeah.
that's just terrifying. That's a
Well, yeah,
yep.
you're gonna have warrior bow if you play this army right, I
hmm
think, and
hmm
they can be a little fragile, although they're
Yeah.
still warriors, and this
Yep.
gives them the ability to act like they closed ranks if there's somebody
Yep.
nearby. So
That's
uh,
huge.
yeah, and that makes them. Do you really want to charge 12 of them that can save on 4?
Yeah, they can save on
And
forwards. You're
they're,
getting
and they're
12 hit. Yep.
warriors. So
hmm
yeah,
I like it. So this is an ability that's, like I said, as long as you have an uncommon,
yeah,
it's getting put on every single round. So
yeah. Any round, I think there's a remote chance of melee.
hmm
It's going there.
yep. Um, And so combined formation is the next one we get to. This is an activation, so you can kind of play it anytime during the activation phase.
Okay, so this gets played every turn. This
Yep.
is probably the best ability on the board. This 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 actually allows you to shoot further than the ballista.
hmm
I know this sounds strange, but when we think about the combinations, it gives your 12 pack of warriors who you typically will deploy somewhere in the middle of your battle line,
hmm
uh, hopefully in cover, but maybe not. But
Maybe
usually I'll
not. Yep.
try to have them, but I'll
hmm
almost always try to have them in some kind of cover, and then they play their range not off of themselves, but off of another unit
hmm
within S.
Yep.
Okay, so if you've got a levy unit that's S away and it's spread out a little bit, you could be almost certainly S plus M away before we even start ranging the L out off that farthest
hmm
levy unit to hit something. You can combine this with the composite bow cav who can
Yep.
straighten way out, and then they can shoot too. You can hit something that's a long way off, and with this combined formation. And
Yeah.
it's the Warriors, and they're shooting 6 dice. So as a for a common.
hmm
So this is just this gives you reach over the battle board that's just unparalleled.
Yeah, it really is. I say, if I wish, if you're interested, I know some guys have put together like a diagram of how to really look at this, because it's wild. Like you said, is that if you have those combo warriors and you've strung them out as max they can be, and then you shoot off of them, you're shooting, what, at that point, you're shooting possibly 2L from a unit who's they're sitting over in the woods, nice and happy, and they're shooting off the mounted unit, which you're maybe positioning well,
Yeah.
just to kind of do that. So
well, and then of course, the combo warriors get to shoot. You get 2 or 3 shots out of
yep.
them too, depending on how you placed them. So it's a great ability.
Yep.
So every turn.
And this one you can also use with the combo warriors just in general too. So I also think like if there's nothing else in range to shoot, and you already have this here, combo warriors, I always like to kind of hold them somewhere behind the line for the first round or two before I need to get them out. And I think about even if I just need to plink with them, but that's a really good ability. Yeah.
Most of the time, I'll use this off of the levy blocks who will be leading the advance. But still, when you've got a levy block on either side of these guys going forward, and the rest, and you think about how big a 12-man levy block is, and I like to run those things in by ranks of 4. So they could, if you spread them out just a little bit to stay legal, you've got a big footprint that these guys this thing can hit now. Coming out.
Yep.
So that ability plus the bolt thrower, just gives you the ability to hit anything on the board. So
nothing's safe. I say that's maybe kind of the thing is nothing is safe on the board.
Yeah. And my common tactic is, by round 2, typically I can shoot these guys off the levee, and then I can shoot them again with another activation as a normal warrior bow unit and take the fatigue when I've gotten 12 shots out of them, because there's generally something that's in range I can hit anyway. And so it just gives it a lot of versatility.
Good. So the next ability we have is Ardor. And so this is 2 commons. It's a melee. You reduce your impetus by 1, and then you gain attack dice and defense dice equal to your impetus plus 1.
Yeah. I've used this on rare occasion. It's not the best ability on the board, I don't think. Anything that takes 2 dice better be really good, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's obviously pretty good if your impetus is high and it's the only thing you're going to do. But you still have to either be receiving a charge or be charging something to make that work. And if your impetus is 4, so you're going to get 4 attack dice and 4 defense dice. That's really beneficial to a 12-man levy unit going in. So now all of a sudden they've got 10 attacks. So they can get pretty good. So it gets used once in a while. It's not the first choice, as we'll see. There's one I think's better coming up.
Yeah, and that's I guess kind of the other struggle too, is it's a 2 dice ability that also takes one of your impetus. So to me, in my head, I'm thinking that's 3 dice because I've got to pump rallying cry, if that's fair to kind of throw in there.
I got to activate them too. So
Yep. So it's there's a lot going into that. Or I think about maybe defending with your levy, because you lose half your attacks and then you gain 4 attacks and then you gain a bunch of So there's a lot of plays with it. I just, like you said, there's not really a lot of want to do it on the board. So so that kind of leads us to the next one is Baratus.
Okay, now this is a great ability. It's 2 dice ability, but it takes a common and an uncommon. But you reduce your impetus by 1 between 1 and 4. So this is our multi-activator. And then I activate that many units. So typically you probably aren't going to activate more than 2, because you're not going to have more than 2 I want to do anything with, because you do have to kind of manage your impetus. But it's activate, so you can do anything with them when you do this. They get 2 bonus attack dice and 2 bonus defense dice if they charge. Okay. So for 2 dice now, I've activated a unit to charge and gotten 2 attack dice and 2 defense dice. That's not bad.
Yeah.
If I reduce my impetus by 2, now I've outcharged 2 units and gotten 4 attack dice and 4 defense dice, which is really, really good.
It is.
That's as good ability as you find. And so it does take another dice or 2 to get the impetus back up. If you get some rares, there's ways to, we'll see here in a little bit to help get those dice back.
Yep. But I also think about the ability to activate levy sometimes can be really hard. And this is a common and an uncommon.
Yeah.
So for 1 uncommon, I could maybe activate 2 levy units
to charge. And then you can get a bonus attack dice if they activate it to shoot, which, you might not have any other way. You might want to shoot your bolt thrower and charge with one of your levy units. So you can pull that off too. and then your bolt thrower could be firing 7 dice at somebody. No,
That's scary. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so the next ability, Plumbate.
yep,
And so this is a common or a rare. It's an
yep.
activation ability. Infantry without ranged weapons. So this goes to
This
like
is the
melee
levy.
levy. Yeah, this is
Yep,
melee
this is the
levy.
levy. Yep,
Hmm.
or melee Hearthguard. Which
Oh,
if you've
melee
got
hearth
them.
guard. Yep, if you've
Yep,
got them, that would actually be not a bad one. Reduce your impetus by 1 unless you used a rare. So if you use a rare on this ability, you don't have to use impetus. Then activate a unit for shooting attack with a range of M that generates no fatigue. For this activation, your figure's shooting aggression is 1. The enemy unit's armor is increased by 1. That's a lot. That's a lot to chew on.
yeah.
An ability.
Well, but because we shoot 1-to-1, that means we're going to get 8 shots most of the
Hmm.
time out of our levy unit.
Hmm.
So 8 shots. This is really good to get the levy up into uh, any levy shooters or
Hmm.
warrior shooters with bow, or cav units if you can get up where you can get shots with them, because then you're getting a +1, but you're still hitting them on a 4. So
Hmm.
and it's a lot of shots coming in. So
Yep.
and it's fatigue free. So as you move up, and you may not want to take fatigue and charge, or you may want to take this shot and then charge with
Mhm.
1 fatigue on you.
Yep.
It's useful. You're going to do it once or twice a game, probably, but most of the time.
But it shows
For an
up when you need
uncommon,
it.
for an uncommon, yeah, it's there for an uncommon. It's not that expensive,
Hmm.
and if you got turn with a lot of rares, it's really pretty good. You don't have to
Yep.
mess with your impetus.
Yeah, you don't even have to take your impetus, and then you get a pretty good shot. So that's
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would never waste this shooting Hearthguard with this, but uh, for shooting low armor stuff, this is
Mhm.
really good.
Yeah. No, I like this. I like the idea too. So that's really cool. Um, so that leads us to the next one is Signa. So this is a common or an uncommon.
Yeah, for a common, here's another one of our multi-activators.
It
This
is.
is this is a really untraditional multi-activator, but activate 2 units for a rest. You can
Hmm.
remove up to 2 fatigues from each of these units, but if you do, then the unit cannot activate again for this turn. So this cleans fatigue up, and
This is.
you can
Hmm.
do a combo here of one takes 1 off, 1 takes 2 off.
Hmm.
Generally speaking, I'll use this taking 1 off 2 because it keeps everybody fresh and ready to fight. But uh, you'll have this up.
Hmm.
I mean, almost to start of after the game gets going. You're
Hmm.
just going to have this up. Your levy units are going to be fighting these to get
Yeah.
rid of fatigue. My combined formation over there, where I'm firing that bow unit twice a turn.
Hmm.
So for 1 rare, or excuse me, for 1 common dice, you're taking a lot of fatigue off your army.
Hmm. I like this too because I think about if you have a which we can get into mercenaries, but I think about the idea of like a the warlord here. That's a great place to clean up.
Mm-hmm.
Man, levy, goodness gracious. That's sometimes I feel like fatigue management with levy armies can be really tough because you don't have enough uncommons to rest a bunch of people, or you don't want to waste them.
Well, I know you play
Yeah.
Anglo-Saxons, and they
Hmm.
have an ability that's similar to this,
Yeah.
but this is better because there's no restrictions on it.
There
you
really
know,
isn't. It's
yeah,
yeah. So
and it's a common.
mhm.
So
One comic could pull 4 fatigue. That's wild.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
absolutely wild. Even if they can't activate, like you said, they're the wall. They're the wall sitting in
yeah,
front of everybody, and you don't care anyways. They're just
yeah,
ready for the next charge. So
yeah.
really cool.
Typically they're going to be soaking it up until they've got fatigue on them. So our charges are never going to be huge.
Hmm.
We're going to be going in with 8, 10 dice, but we're going to be going into fatigue units because we're
Hmm.
probably going to try to take the charge first, or
Hmm.
or or beat them down with shooting before we fight.
Yep.
And now we're charging with 8, 10 dice, and we've got ability that's coming up that's going to really help that. But
Hmm.
if we can lower their armor before this happens, obviously those lesser dice become a lot
Hmm.
more valuable,
Yeah, they do.
and it's hard to hurt us back, which
Yeah.
is really the key to it.
Yep. So it's really cool. I really like that ability. So the next one is Scuda. This is a shooting reaction or a melee. Reduce your impetus by 1. You can re-roll a number of defense dice of your choice up to your current impetus value plus 1.
Okay, every turn. For a common. This is probably where the first common goes.
Okay.
Almost every turn. It's a really good defense ability. When you can, you're saving on 4s or 5s, and you can re-roll all the misses. So it's better than having defense dice.
Yeah. Jeez, I like that. That's good. Like you said, it's a common, so you just got to put it there, and excuse me. When you need it, you need it. So it's good. So this takes us into the next one. Go ahead.
So back to Scuda. It does require an impetus, so you do have to kind of watch your impetus, and this is a lot better, obviously, if your impetus is high. So early game, through the first 3-4 turns, we're going to make an effort to keep that impetus up around 3 or 4, and then we can let it start to slide a little bit more late game, and then we may. It's just all management. It just takes practice to, what we're going to do and what the battle is dictating on how we're going to do it.
Yeah. And, quickly touching on impetus, I know that's something I remember the first few times I remember you running this board and you said, man, I just feel like I can't figure the impetus out well enough. And now when I watch you, it just seems very seamless. Your ability to manage impetus is, I don't think that question comes up much anymore. So
no, you just have to get it through your head when you play the board that you're going to have to put a dice up there, after turn 2 or 3 every turn, and it's just something's going up there. Hopefully you get a rare to go up there and you can just, stick it up there and pop that impetus back up. But if you have to put 2 up there, you have to, because the board sings for you if you do.
Yep. So that's I wanted to touch on that because, like I said, I know it's something. Like now, I don't even hear you talk about it. So, So the next ability is Adversity. This is a rare. That's an orders ability. So take 2 of your available saga dice. 3 if your impetus is 2 or less. Roll them and add them to your inactive saga dice.
Yeah. So this replaces the traditional upper right hand ability. You only get to do it once, though. So you can't roll up from nothing. But because if your impetus is low, so one of the tricks here is, when your impetus gets down, it depends on how many dice you have available. You might want to play, especially if you're really low, you might want to play a dice or 2 to get your impetus up to 2. And then you can use those dice to re-roll and then put them up there again and use them again to raise your impetus up.
Yep.
So there's some tricks with Adversity and the impetus that just take a little practice and thinking about when that comes up. But, you do have the ability to get, even early game, because I'll run this as a 7 dice army. And so you've got ability to get that extra dice in the game.
I like it. Like I said, I like Adversity too, because, and this is maybe kind of a quick question. Do you use this? I think about the ability of, like, if your impetus is down at 1 or 2 and you go, that rare could go up there and give me 2, but you know what? I could roll 3 and maybe get a rare. And, I always think about kind of the explosion of, like, oh man, there's 2 rares and something, or even just 3 commons.
Yeah, it's just, you have to look at what your dice are and where your impetus is. So there's no fast rule here.
Okay.
But if your impetus is on 2, and do you play the rare and rallying cry before or after you roll this? It's just, because you're gonna, anything you move off 2, then you only get to roll 2 dice. So do you want to get the dice back, or do you want to roll some dice? So it's just where it's at.
That's fair. I guess it's kind of
really
a situation.
Usually it's only going to come into play if your impetus is down to 0 or 1, but there's times you'll run it down there and just hope by next turn I'm going to get that rare so I can build her back up. Especially if you've still got a lot of dice, your odds are you'll get it.
Okay.
And I've never played a game where I got stuck on 0, so you can get the impetus up. It's just if you can roll the dice again. So, and then the last ability is in this Sign Conquer. This is one of the better abilities in Saga. You don't do it a lot, but when you do it, it can just be devastating. So this shooting or melee, you can do it with anything. It combines with any of your shooting abilities, composite bows, the pumbate, the regular shooting, or the bow thrower, or the melee for your your levy warriors here, or your levy sword and board guys who just don't have a lot of attacks, but
Yeah.
reduce your impetus by 1. Next, discard second dice equal to your impetus value plus 1 for each. So if your impetus is high, this is deadly against Hearthguard.
Yeah, it really is.
For each dice discarded this way, add 1 automatic hit to the hit you score. So if my impetus is 4 or 3 or 4, and you go into a big Hearthguard pack with 8 attacks, yeah, but 3 or 4 of them are auto hits, and there's a lot more of us than there are of you, so it's a great ability,
It is it.
You'll use that, typically 1, 2, 3 times a game. Depends on how much combat's going on.
Yep.
But when you use it, you want to pick your spot, and it can be really, really good.
And I say like in my head, the first time I read this ability, I thought, man, if I could get Levy to charge some Hearthguard, I would probably just laugh as I played this ability. Just like, here's the auto hits, and I don't even care what your armor is at this point.
Well, and even charging, you're going to play limes along with this, and Scuda, and so we're saving on 4 when we charge. We're re-rolling our defense dice, so it's it can that 4 sword board levy is pretty tough.
It's kind of scary, honestly, because it's just they're very efficient when they want to hit something.
Yeah.
And in this sign Conquer, it's an uncommon too, so it's not the hardest to get either. It's not just a rare only ability. You can really hinge it.
You're never going to play a rare on that unless you just don't have anything else, But just for an uncommon, it's a great ability.
Yep. And so that's man, talk about a good ability to end a board on. Holy cow.
Yeah.
And I will say there's the history behind this. I'm not going to get too much into it, but the beauty is this is kind of the doctrine of the Romans too. So like I said, seriously, I don't want to, I'm not going to dive too far into it because I want to talk about some tactics.
Yeah.
But in this sign Conquer is such a great Roman statement. So but so I kind of want to jump really quick. So for you, as we've now looked at all of these abilities, what are you kind of trying to do? So now we've looked at all these abilities and you think about, here's the army list you have. You got some levy foot, you got your Manny Ballista, your 1.5 of bow warriors.
Yeah.
How are you kind of putting some of these abilities together? Kind of what's the standard play for you?
Well, and also there's as we talk about this, we probably don't talk about the work unit I like to take with them when I can.
Okay.
So I like to take guides with them. I think it's one of the better mercenary units in the Age of Invasions book. And it has a couple of wonderful abilities for the Romans. One, it's another warrior unit with javelins, which that ignores terrain when they move. And if you get them into terrain, they're unbelievable because they shoot full value in terrain.
Yeah, their aggression is 1 while they're shooting out of terrain.
They don't melee as well in there because they're only aggression half, but then outside of terrain they're normal, which again is useful. So they can act like normal javelin warriors, and they ignore terrain when they move. But the other big ability for the Romans is they control the terrain setup. And so you can remove terrain after the terrain's set up, or you can add terrain, or you can move terrain. And so trying to block off the Manita Ballista when you're setting terrain against the Romans is kind of a lost cause, because they're going to be able, if you've got the warriors or got the guides, they can manipulate that. Or you can save your swamp and stick it down after you get done, so so just a really, really good unit to take, I think. Tactics wise, I like to set up and play combined arms. It's what other than one army I play, and I still play them that way a little bit, but most of the armies I like to play, I like to play in this way. And so if there's objectives in the game, I want to contest them. I don't necessarily want to be trying to run over them unless you just have to take them. But I want to get up and contest move and make you try to move me first, because we've got other things to do while you're trying to move me, because this board can outshoot almost any other board. Carolinians maybe can outshoot it, but some of the things this thing can do, and because the hitting power of it is really, really good. So especially in the age it's in, it's really good. And so we're going to pound you with shooting until you to make you engage us. And we've already
Yeah.
talked about the sword and board levy being able to soak up that first charge, and then you got a problem.
Yep.
And so that's typically the way I want to play them. And then turn 4 or 5 will counterattack, depending or earlier. And I'm not averse to bringing the warriors out to fight, hand to hand. Then as things get down close, because they can't hit hard. They're warriors, and we do have
Yeah.
a little bit of ability to support them and to make them where they're not quite so squishy. So, but hopefully, the other guys' units are kind of whittled down to some extent, and
Yep.
so we've got smaller targets to hit with that big pack of warriors who should be, pretty fresh.
Well, and that's where I like I said, I've played you a lot with these guys, and I play a lot of like Byzantines and last Romans, which I feel like they all kind of have the same flavor in the
Yeah,
sense of like, I'm not going to punch really hard, but I'm going to shoot really efficiently. I'm going to be able to get on top of something and you can't knock me off of it.
yeah,
Which this board does great, right? Like you said, get up
yeah.
on top of that objective, get into a place that you want to hold and say, come get me. I'm going to shoot you until you got to get over here.
Well, I think the thing that I really like about this board is that it shoots better than some of those other boards that want to do that,
Yeah.
because the Byzantines, they have ability to do some shooting, but not like this board does.
Not like this board.
So
No, not
yeah,
at all.
I mean, this board is it's really hard for the opponent to play, because do you hang back? If you hang back, you're just going to get picked apart because of the range of this
Yep.
stuff. It's not, you can't, you're not staying out of L range, because, I move a levy unit up S and all of a sudden you're in range, so the warriors don't even have to move.
Yeah.
And of course, the mana ballista, unless you're just hiding behind trees someplace, it's going to be able to hit you about any place you're on the board. So,
Yep.
And combat bonus is a wonderful thing for this, especially if your guy's sitting back. I'm not opposed to firing the mana ballista with 12 shots at you.
Yeah.
So I mean, if I've got the right dice to throw them in combat bonus, if you want to sit back there and take that, that's up to you. So
Yep.
that's a great tactic. You do that once, and they're going to start coming forward. So
Yep.
So there's some tricks with this. If you have the guides, you're going to want to try to get them across the board into the enemy terrain, and then they get really difficult to deal with.
Yeah, you got to dig them out, and they shoot really well out of that terrain. So
yeah, and so there's if the enemy puts down a heavy cover unit, and they're not right up on the very front of it, move the guides into it, and then shoot. And you're in heavy cover too. And do you want to fight them? They're warriors.
Yeah, you don't want to go fight them. Yep.
So and then they're going to shoot. They're going to outshoot you. So it's there's a lot of things you can do with it. So kind of a combined arms approach to the board.
And so I like that too, is this is where I guess kind of some of the ideas of maybe some of the questions I like to answer with this is when I think, how am I going to handle a melee army versus like another shooter? And I know, at least for me, and I say looking at the Roman board, fighting the Roman board, I think the idea a lot of is take the punch out of each unit, right? I don't care to blow every single unit off the table. I just want to take enough punch out of every unit that when you finally do engage me, it's not really going to do much. And my levy are now probably just as combat effective as your 6 warriors that you have left.
Oh yeah. We're trading warriors for levy.
Yep.
That's the trade. We always want to make.
And so that's why, like I said, I know that's the way I play them. And so for you, when you think about playing against a shooter army or against a melee army, do you feel like you have a different tactic, or is it really still kind of that combined push up and just have a good wall?
Well, it depends. If something like playing against Huns, which I haven't had to do a lot, because one thing in our group, I've been the one who played Huns too a lot, but they I'm going to push the levy forward a lot, because the levy can shoot them, so with Plumbate, and so the Hun player doesn't want the levy moving up within him of him, so it's there's always that fact, so you can kind of press, and once you get up where you can kind of move them in and Plumbate them, you can get 8 shots hitting on 4, going to kill some horses.
Yeah.
So you press with that. Uh, but I guess most infantry armies, you're going to kind of move into objective range if you have to, or
Mhm.
just make them come to you. So
Mhm.
uh, and that's kind of the tactic that I like. And once they come, then we'll fight on the where,
Yep.
when and where we want to.
Yep. You get to dictate the pace because
And and,
it's,
and
yep.
and and traditionally, that's kind of what the Romans did.
Yeah, it
So
is.
they're going to try to dictate the battlefield and
Mhm.
set the lines up and make you fight them where they want to.
Yeah. No, I like that. And like I said, I've seen a lot of guys doing really well with Romans. It's like I said, I feel like a couple years ago I didn't really see him a lot around, and now every time I look at like an Age of Invasion, Age of Viking tournament, you just see a couple Roman guys hanging out, and they're usually like top, middle, all the way to contesting top tables with them. Um, and it's really
Yeah,
cool to see.
yeah. It's just a really fun army to play. It takes a lot of thought because
Hmm.
it's not straightforward like some boards are, where it's a
Hmm.
little simpler that
Yep.
quite how you're going to do it. So you do have always the impetus that you have to account for, and where
Hmm.
it's at, and what you're going to be able to do, and in your
Yeah.
turn, and what's left over for the defense, the defense turn, and you have to, it's a juggling act constantly with the army,
Hmm.
but by that same token, it makes it really fun to play.
Yeah, and that's like I said, I like the idea of like trying to figure out all the nuance and like where and when to use it and how to use it. And this board gives it to you because
Yeah.
you get to add the extra layer of impetus on top of that. When do you use what abilities? How much impetus do you use for those abilities? Um, what are the things that kind of throw you off? I guess if you don't mind me asking, that's
Sure.
when you're fighting somebody, how do they kind of mess up your battle plan, or what are just armies that are tough for you?
Well, I think heavy Hearthguard armies can be a little bit of a problem because it's a little harder to shoot them. Uh, Armies
Hmm.
with a lot of defense dice available can be a bit of a problem too.
Hmm.
Obviously, big big levy blocks are a little harder to take down, but again, we're kind of on even terms with those because we've got a lot of
Yeah.
our own of the same guys.
Yep.
But I'd rather trade levy for warriors than levy for levy. But we're going to. But typical those other big levy blocks, we can outshoot them. So
Yep.
uh, uh, there'll be less of them when they get to us, hopefully. Uh, so probably big Hearthguard armies or armies with lots of defense dice. One of the last games I lost was an out of age game, which was uh, against successors in a
Hmm.
thing that was totally set up. It was probably the worst matchup I could have had. So
Unfortunately.
yeah,
Yep.
it happens. That, but I don't really like to play out of age stuff, and that was uh, just the way that tournament was set up. So.
Yep.
Uh, but typically speaking, in age and against Viking armies, these guys will do pretty well.
Yeah. Is there any specific, so I know we've talked a little bit about terrain of like the Manny Ballista. Is there anything that you prefer when you look at terrain? Do you like it a little more open? Do you like to kind of close some of the channels off and force them through things?
Well,
Um,
I don't typically like to take a lot of big terrain pieces because I do want room to get my levies out in the open so
mhm.
they can move. So what I'm looking for when I place terrain is maybe to mess with your deployment zone some.
Mhm.
Taking the rocky hill
Yep.
or a woods, or depends on how deep the deployment zone is. I'm not going to give you something you can use back there, but
Mhm.
uh, you know, if it's an L deployment zone, the Rocky Hill is really good because it messes with the whole thing.
Yep.
Uh, throwing a swamp in your deployment zone might cause you a little bit of problem. But then
Yeah.
on my side, I want the rocky ground or maybe the ruins, and then I
Mhm.
probably want a swamp. Uh,
Okay.
uh, given those things,
Mhm.
that's what I'm looking at. And if I've got the guides, I know I'm going to get some of that. Sometimes I'll put the open hill down on my side. Uh, just to make sure I'm open on part of the board, and anything else that you give me, I can probably use. So
Yeah.
because
I guess it's true.
I can
Yep.
set the ballista on the hill because it's open
Mhm.
terrain.
Yep.
So uh, and then the guides, what and I, again help me dictate, what's going to be on the battlefield.
Mhm. I like
And
that.
yeah,
Man, well, I guess, and quickly, I want to ask, do you have any? So when I think about the abilities, you kind of talked about a couple that you really like, and I kind of want to maybe end on this is thinking about, are there any of the abilities that you like to combo? I always think about the trick of some of these more complicated armies is learning what dice go where at kind of what time. So figuring out the combos. What's the combo play here? What's the multiple dice that need to go down? Is there anything
Well,
that you feel like is a go-to for you?
well, yeah. So it depends on who you're playing. So if you know you're gonna get shot back a lot, you're going to play Scuda, and then you're going to put something up in combat bonus. So
Hmm.
so you can absorb a couple of rounds of shooting without getting hurt too badly.
Hmm.
Uh, most armies aren't going to shoot you more than a couple of times a turn. Uh, you're always going to play Signa, obviously, if you've got
Hmm.
fatigue on you, because it's
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
I mean, even if you just need to pick up one fatigue off one of your levy units, you can pick it up with a common instead of a rare or an uncommon.
Yeah, with an uncommon, yep. Mhm.
So that's just an advantage there. And generally speaking, you'll have a couple of them. Uh, Combos, when you're charging somebody, if I'm trying to make sure I win this fight, I already got 2 defense dice. Do I need limes? I tend to use limes a little bit more of defense because when those levy units close ranks, now they're saving on 3
Yeah,
with limes.
they're impossible to move on that, yep.
Yeah, yeah. So they outnumber you. You're going to have a hard time killing any of them.
Mhm, mhm.
If I play lives and I've got Scuda available, who I can reroll the misses, it's really hard to move one.
Mhm,
So that's a really nice combo. But
mhm.
the main combo that when you really think about combos here is, when do I play in this sign conquer and what am I shooting at?
Mhm.
So this is the Hearthguard killer, and that's what I usually use it for. Although sometimes we'll use it on warriors or the warlord,
Yeah.
and so if I get something up into the warlord, and now I can put a bunch of auto hits on him, or
Uh-huh.
Hearthguard units, doesn't really matter what shot at him. Shooting, armor 5 Hearthguard, even with the ballista,
It's hard, yep.
yeah, she's still only hitting on 4.
Mhm,
So auto hit, that's a whole different ball game. So if I get
mhm.
some auto hits, I'm probably going to kill, at least a couple of them. So
Man.
uh, uh,
Mhm,
so that's the combo. When do I use in this side
mhm,
conquer?
mhm,
When do I use Scuda and limes together?
mhm.
So how do I raise my impetus? There's a lot of comboing going on there with
Yep.
rallying cry,
Mhm,
because between rallying cry and adversity and raising that impetus up.
mhm.
So those are the combos, and it
Okay.
takes a little practice, especially on that last one.
Yep. As we were talking about in this side conquer, and I always think about the combo warriors. And I think
Yeah,
about this running up late game when it kind of everybody's kind of just a little hurt, a little bruised
yeah,
up, and that Hearthguard unit from somebody wants to come out, right? That Warlord's got to come out to help clean up the table. And I think, well, I have a combo unit back here that can drop 4 auto hits.
yeah. Yeah, it can be, if your impetus is high and you've got
Yep.
that and you can
Hmm.
pull that off, it's
That's scary.
obviously it's frightening to the opponent, so
Yep, little
you know,
4 pack of Hearthguard or a Warlord that's just a little out of position.
yeah,
Because the beauty is they're auto hits. So the nice
yeah,
thing is I can double activate a unit, run all the way across the board, and your armor doesn't matter.
yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, if you've got, you know, four four combo warriors, they may want to run over there and engage the warlord if he's got a fatigue or two on him and just
yep.
sacrifice theirself to
Hmm.
kill him. But if you've got Scuda up, you might not even lose them.
You might
So it's
not.
you might not lose all of them. So and you certainly have a
Oh.
great chance of killing him.
Hmm.
So
I like it. Like I said, I like that. That's a that's it. I know the Roman board is something I will be building. This is definitely on the block. Um, because like I said, I've looked at the Aventine miniatures and they actually have Maurice. And at some point I'm gonna have to paint Maurice and paint a bunch of Romans. Just for the Strategikon saga, I feel like I have to have a Maurice and his whole army. Um, but yeah, so I want to say as we kind of close this out, or do you have any last thoughts? Maybe something we didn't cover? Um, anything you can think of?
well,
Uh,
I've played the Byzantines a little bit, the last Romans a little
mhm,
bit. I've yet to play the Republican Romans.
mhm.
Uh, but this is the best Roman board. I think my by quite a bit. I mean, a lot of guys like the Byzantine board,
Yep.
but Byzantine board tends to be more defensive than this one is. And this board
Yeah.
can attack, and it just attacks in a different way. But
Mm-hmm.
so you can score some points with this board.
Yeah. I like this board a lot, and I will say, as a Byzantine player, I know we've had this discussion in the background, because we're split in our group here locally. We have a couple guys that love Romans, and a couple of us really like Byzantines.
Yeah.
And I think we're gonna have to settle the debate at some point. But I mean, I don't care. I don't care who you are. This board is good. This board is really good. It's showing up everywhere. And who doesn't want to be the Romans? I say that's for me. This is one of my favorite. Is a lover of like Eastern Roman history. This covers both, obviously, at the time frame.
Yeah, we want to be the washed, not the unwashed. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But well, thank you so much for coming on, Charles. Thank you for coming on, sharing this with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Brett.
Yeah.
I enjoy you having this podcast.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and like I said, I especially love the fact that the first faction review I get to do is for the namesake of the podcast, and luckily you run them very well. So thanks for sharing everything with us, and yeah, we'll kind of hopefully get to some more faction reviews here soon enough. I know I got a couple more lined up with you, Charles, and we'll kind of get to it, but thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you, Brett.
Yep.